Hey, welcome to the Star Wars Unlearned podcast. My name is Josiah Shuett, and I'm joined by Nathan Hawley. What we're doing is we're looking at Star Wars from the perspective of its creator. So we're turning off our fan brains and really just trying to uncover the story that Lucas is trying to tell. We're in the middle of our series on the Phantom Menace, where we explore the filmmaking, the history, the mythology, and everything else that Lucas and his team used to bring this first chapter of the Star Wars saga to life. So join us as we dive in and unlearn what we have learned about the Star Wars story. I just like that this scene between Jar Jar and Boss Nass, where they're like just buddies, and like they just arm in arm, and Jar Jar's like, nah, he's complimenting him, and Jar Jar's like, nah, stop it, you're too kind. And then because it's really crazy, like they were going to execute Jar Jar at the beginning of this movie, right? Remember we talked about that, like that was going to be his punishment. His punishment for coming back from banishment was they're going to kill him, and now he's going to be made a general. Now he's going to lead troops into battle. So it's just so fun seeing how far he's come in this movie, right? He turned out to be one of the most important pieces on the board, right? And no one would have thought of that. Again, it's the most underestimated character, but Qui-Gon saw his potential, and then Padme did, and it's just he turned out to be so important. And of course, he's not done yet. He's gonna help turn the tide of the battle through his clumsiness, probably unintentionally, but the Force works in mysterious ways, or in this case, goofy ways, and is gonna use Jar Jar even more. But I always love Jar Jar, and it's just fun to kind of see his arc. I haven't really looked at his arc too much in this movie until I started researching for this, and I was like, oh, it's really cool to see that.
It is cool to see that, and of course that's a parallel for like what's coming in episode 2, right? he's gonna be the one that gives the Chancellor the powers to create an army, right? This bumbling little amphibian becomes the guy who basically allows the war to happen. Quite interesting. I mean, Palpatine, I'm sure, would have found someone else, but yeah, he just plays it well. So yeah, I hear you, man. I love it. I love Jar Jar. He's always, I'm just cracking up watching this scene again, because he just plays it so well. I love the way he puts his arm on Boss Nass's shoulders. He's about to pass out. And, Boss Nass gives him that look like, what are you doing touching royalty? And then he realizes what's going on, and Jar Jar just passes out. And then I love that laugh that Boss Nass does. It's just great. I love it, man. It's just great. I'm a kid of the 90s, the 80s, 90s, Saturday morning cartoons that I grew up with. This is totally like Saturday morning cartoon kind of stuff, I love it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very broad. It's very big. It's so funny now how family movies or kids movies today are always animated. That didn't used to be the case. It used to be, there's movies, think of like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. That's a classic family movie or kids movie. Most live action movies are not marketed towards kids. Kids movies are always animated these days. And you kind of see the opposite of this happening in a place like Japan, for example, because in Japan, animation isn't associated with kids. It's a thing for everyone to enjoy. Adults can enjoy it. It's all ages. There are kid cartoons, but there's cartoons for adults too. And for here in America, it's got associated with Saturday morning kids programming, but even before that, like Looney Tunes, cartoons back in the day, those weren't strictly for kids. There's a lot of adult jokes in those old Looney Tunes because adults would go to the theaters. These originally shown in theaters. So it's just interesting how animation has become this kid thing in America, where it didn't originally start out that way, and that live action has become this adult thing. You can forgive modern audience for looking at Star Wars and saying this is too childish for me. I don't like it. They don't get that it's for kids, because everything that this much budget, this much production value doesn't go into kids movies anymore. They're recognized. This is what they think of, when they see Lord of the Rings or the new, Dune Part 2 just came out. Like that's the same kind of level of production and money going into a huge blockbuster for adults, or at least teenagers, at least, And so it's just interesting. I totally understand when people look at Star Wars and say like they don't quite get into it as adults, but they might think that it is for them. And I just think it's a failure. Like, oh, this isn't grabbing me. It's like, no, this is actually for kids. This is actually, think of it as a cartoon. That's why I think it's interesting that Clone Wars, people love Clone Wars so much. So many adults like Clone Wars. They get into that because it seems to fit for them. The kind of campy dialogue and the very broad humor sometimes works better for them in a cartoon setting because they're used to that. That makes sense to them. Whereas in live action, in a movie, that doesn't quite compute. That's just my theory anyway. But
that's definitely an interesting theory. Because, I mean, yeah, we talked about this before. I mean, you don't need to be even a hardcore Star Wars fan to realize that most adults, when this movie came out, did not like it. The Star Wars fans did not enjoy episode 1. And of course some for sure, but I mean, like, it had a really negative response overall from the adults. I mean, kids loved it, like you and me. We grew up with it. It's great. My wife, it's her favorite Star Wars movie, because it's well, we know we were kids. We were that target age when this came out. But you hear a lot of responses from the guys in the 70s. They did not enjoy it. I never thought about why, but that makes sense, or at least not. I mean, I guess I thought about it, but we talked about it a little bit in our podcast, but I've never really nailed down a particular reason. But I think you're onto something. That makes sense to me. So I love this kind of humor when I was this age watching it. And I still do. And I think that's part of the reasons why the prequels have aged so well. All of us are now getting into our 30s and 40s and whatever. And it's what we know. It's great. But, good point.
Yeah. And one of the examples that I kind of point to, at least for me personally, that I can kind of attest to this happening is that I don't know if you ever saw the Batman movies from like the 90s. They got progressively like campier and cheesier as they went on. And it started out kind of more dark and intense, kind of like how Batman normally is portrayed. But by the very last one is considered one of the worst movies of all time. It's called Batman and Robin. And I'd heard how awful this movie was for years and years and years. And the more I heard about it, I'm like, I can't, how can it be that bad? It doesn't seem like it's gonna be that bad. And I researched the movie, and the movie was being made for kids. It was made to the goal of the movie was very clear. They wanted to sell Happy Meals. They had a thing with McDonald's, like, we want to sell toys. We want to, they had like a deal with like Discover Card or something. So it was basically, they wanted to make a big commercial, and they wanted to make it very, very kid friendly, because they'd gotten a lot of flack from parents with the earlier Batman movies that they were a little too intense for kids. And the parents didn't know, they thought the Batman would be safe for their kids because they knew the old like 1960s TV show that was very kid friendly, and they went to see the movie. Oh, my kid was scarred, like it was too intense for them, and so they were very angry, and so they didn't want any more bad letters from parents, and so they just told the director, Joel Schumacher in this case, they said, hey, just make it kid friendly, make it bright and colorful and cheesy and funny, and can't make a cartoon, make a Saturday morning cartoon for kids with a live action cast with big budget, and we'll put as much money as you want into it. It's like, well, the budget it's got the budget of the Matrix, but it's got the heart and soul of like Care Bears or something. It's like a cartoon from the kids or something. And so knowing that and watching the movie, I had a great time watching the movie. I thought it was really fun, and because I knew going into it, like, okay, I'm not going into this expecting The Dark Knight. I'm going into this expecting the Batman show from the 60s, a cartoony kind of campy style. And once I had the expectation, and once I knew it wasn't for me, then I could enjoy it. I can kind of put myself in that kind of 6-year-old Josiah headspace and go, oh, I would have loved this as a kid. And I looked at all the comment, looked at YouTube video comments. I think it was on the making of the movie, and every comment that was positive said like, I love this movie when I was a kid. It was all these kids who loved it, and everyone who hated it was like a teenager or older, because it wasn't for them, and they thought it was going. So it was just a disconnect. They thought they're going to get The Dark Knight. They thought they're going to get something that was intense and dark that was made for them, but then they were given the kid cartoon that they weren't expecting, and so it's just that disconnect made them dislike it. So I think it's just all about your perspective going into it. So I totally understand what people, when you grow up with Star Wars, and when you're an adult, you think that the things have grown up with you, but George didn't change. His audience that he had in mind stayed the same, even though the people who saw it grew older, and they changed, and their tastes changed. So I get it. But in this case, yeah, I think that, Star Wars is, even though it's, my point there was that even as an adult, that's the first time I saw it was as an adult, but I could enjoy it because I knew it was a kid's movie. So I think if people looked at Star Wars as for kids, they would enjoy it as adults more. Like if you're showing Star Wars to an adult, I still think it's important to let them know that it's for kids, because they'll be put in the right headspace, and they'll kind of turn their little 6-year-old brain on, and they'll stop looking at it as a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, whatever it is, and they'll understand like, oh, if it's Jar Jar, going, oh, I'm passing out, is a very, very broad cartoony thing, and they're not going to be thrown off by that, even though the rest of the movie has this kind of patina of a very, very high end production, big blockbuster movie for adults, or at least teenagers and up. So that's just my thinking, is that once you have that knowledge, it makes it easier to enjoy it even as an adult. That's what happened to me with that Batman movie. I wasn't a kid when I saw it. So anyway, sorry. I'm tangenting really hard right now, but
no, that's okay. I mean, it's worth talking about, because I feel like it really helps you. I mean, that's how you read anything, right? Like if you go and you read a kid's book and you expect an adult story, you're going to be disappointed. Even if it is a good story. I'm not saying like adults can't enjoy kids' stories, right? Because they're people. They're fully people. So they understand good and evil. And, they just like George has always done here. I mean, these are really clear things. There's a reason Star Wars resonates with adults too. But it makes a difference to understand the audience, the original audience, the context. And boy, it changes everything. People will ask me a lot of times, what's your favorite, Lord of the Rings or Star Wars? And I'm like, man, you can't compare the two. It's like apples to oranges, Like they're just so different. And I mean, yes, they're different like mythologies, but it's just different audiences, different points. I mean, it's just like, man, to me, I just love them both. How could you? It's like saying I love pizza and ice cream. Like they're great. But yeah, I do think it matters. I really do. Especially in that's a good point in introducing this to adults. I've never thought about that because I've never really introduced Star Wars to another adult before. Like I've just been introducing it to my kids and they love it, I could totally see where you need to say that to an adult. And well, that's not true. I guess I watched it once with a youth pastor friend of mine, and this was years ago. And he just laughed. He and his wife laughed so hard during this episode too, especially with Anakin and Padme. Where she was like, "Oh, Annie," they had fun with that. It's like, well, yeah, I get you, but there's a reason for this stuff. So, yeah, which we'll come to. But yep, I get it, man. All the same. I love it. I love Jar Jar. He's great. He makes me laugh. So, but again, I was a kid. I was a target age. I was about 10 years old when this movie came out. So, yeah, loved it.
Yeah, and it's good that this. I think it's good that we have this little brief moment of levity and humor before we get into this. What could be a very boring scene for kids, especially, which is what Lucas calls the pointer scene, which is it's the same as the scene where General Dodana explains the attack on the Death Star, right? It tells the audience what we need to accomplish in the action scenes to follow, right? So when we're in the middle of the chaos, the audience can keep track of the progress of the heroes, right? So it's all about, it's like it's a huge information dump before the action. And so that's what happens here. And again, I don't have many notes about the rest of the scene because it's basically very straightforward. Just here's what you do this, you're gonna do this. Here's why we gotta get the whole big thing is we gotta get the Viceroy. That's like the very last scene is very last shot is a close up of Padme going, we gotta get the Viceroy. That's what everything depends on. And she's almost looking at the audience like, just remember this. This is what we're trying to do. Like it's very, very clear. And it's very boring. No filmmaker ever wants to make these scenes because they're very, very they can be very, very boring, but they're necessary. Because again, like the end of this movie is going to be very, very chaotic. There's a lot of things happening. And if you don't know what each group is trying to accomplish, you're not gonna know what's happening. So
yeah, makes sense. I never really thought about that. I never thought about how it parallels episode 4 either. That totally makes sense. Because I think George even said, like, the prequels is almost a remaking of the original, but we're putting Anakin in the same shoes as Luke, right? And to see how they act differently. Like, we're going to put them in the same situations and see how they react differently. So I never thought about that. That's cool. Yeah. I also think this scene really establishes the stakes, right? Because we've had a moment of, like you said, of levity, both with Jar Jar, but also with the Gungans. Everybody's cheering like, yeah, we're on the same team, It seems like we got this, we can do this, but then it's like, oh wait, we got to be realistic. This is gonna be really hard, And I feel like the scene does a good job of setting the stakes. Qui-Gon's like, yeah, you guys gotta be ready. There could be many deaths, right? A lot of Gungans could be killed today, and Panaka, the army is much larger than we thought, and everybody's kind of questioning Padme, like, what are you thinking?
Yeah, and it's true because I never thought about this until like today, actually, that the pressure is really on the pilots in this scenario because I really picked up on the fact that Panaka says, this is not a fight that I think we can win, and Qui-Gon's like, oh, the Gungans are probably going to die, so the Gungans are going into a fight that they can't win. Like the Gungans actually cannot defeat the droids. I never really thought about that as a kid until now, where it's like the only way the Gungans get out of there alive is if the droid control ship is shut down. Because you see the tide of the battle is we see it. The Gungans have lost essentially. They're being rounded up and killed, and they've got their hands behind their heads, and the droids are taking them away. And the only thing that saves Jar Jar and Captain Tarpal's life, right, is Anakin destroying the control ship. So I never thought about that. Yeah, exactly. Like you said, the stakes before into the scene where it's like the Gungans are going to their death unless they have no chance of winning. Like they said, the army is just too big. They're too powerful, unless they have that one weakness, that one Achilles heel, which is the hubris and the greed and the stupidity of the Trade Federation to put all their army under one control ship, under um, one relatively unprotected, easy target. So
Yeah, boy, and this, I mean, talk about parallels again to the Death Star. You know, Episode 4, same situation. The rebels are done; they can't win this fight. But there's one fighter putting all their hopes in, pretty much. The Skywalker family here, but yeah, huh? I've never thought about that. Yeah, that's really cool to see. Like, this is a losing battle they're walking into. I also think it's cool to watch Padme here. She's so different than the whole rest of the movie. And I just think that's so cool to watch. I had never picked up on it before. Like, she's so confident. She's got a plan. I mean, this is the Padme we're going to see in Episode 2, The Clone Wars, Episode 3. Like, here she is, you know? I had never picked up on that before. Like, she's got that Skywalker stubbornness now. She's not the naive little girl we met at the beginning. So cool. Wow. Yeah, it's fun to watch. Changes everything.
Yeah, you see this perfect marriage of Padme and her identity is Padme and her identity is the Queen. She's put them together now, and so she has this relationship with Qui-Gon Obi-Wan. She's using that to her advantage now. She's talking with them. She's not she doesn't have she's not using that mask like we talked about. That you're so smart to bring up that mask that's kind of this barrier between her and the Jedi, and the world around it. She's not hiding behind that, and she's out there. She's Anakin's right there witnessing it too. Like she's not hiding anymore. And it's just interesting to see. Like, you can see the Queen in there. You can also see Padme in there. That's all I'm saying. I'm just rambling and saying the same thing over and over again. But you just see both. You see both sides of her working together here. Just bits and pieces. Sometimes Padme comes up a bit, and then the Queen side of her comes out a little bit more here. And so it's just fun to see that, because we saw that in the swamp earlier, where she kind of first took charge and unified those two sides of herself. And she'll just be that. Yeah, you said that's just who she is. Her character arc is pretty much complete at this point, where she hasn't accomplished her goal, but she has become who she needs to be to accomplish the goal, and that she'll stay that person, like you said, throughout the rest of her life.
Yeah, and it's fun to see. It's fun to see her. How do you want to say that? I mean, her confidence, like Palpatine's going to say here in a minute, she's more foolish than I thought. It's that confidence is on the border of foolishness and brilliance. You know what I mean? Like, it's right in between there, and it's just so neat to see that dynamic. Because, man, it's just so different from the Padme the whole first half of the movie, and it's really cool to watch. And even the Jedi, I mean, like, she learned all this from Qui-Gon, and even Qui-Gon's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure your fighters can penetrate the shield on these cruisers. Like, are you sure about this? I'm okay. Here we go. And Obi-Wan's like, yeah, there's an even greater threat. Like, what if they come back with more? And then you get full on Padme. Well, that's why we can't fail. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's true. Like, she's almost reckless here, because and before, early in the movie, she's like, you Jedi are far too reckless. She's like, I'm sure Qui-Gon doesn't want to put your son in danger. Like, she's the pacifist. She's like, didn't want anyone to be put in danger. Now she's like, yeah, you Gungans are going to have to, many of you are probably going to die, but we got to get this done. It's so different. Yeah, it's such a huge change.
Even more reckless than Qui-Gon, which is great.
Yeah, even Qui-Gon. Yeah, exactly. Even Qui-Gon, the most reckless one, is like, okay, wow, sure, all right, we'll go along with that.
Yeah. What did I do? I created a monster.
Exactly. He's like, okay, yeah.
I find it interesting too. There's kind of just watching it. It's fun to watch Anakin in this. He doesn't have any word of dialogue, but it's just kind of fun to see him. That George intercuts to him several times, and Anakin's just kind of watching this all. It's just kind of neat to watch him. I wonder what George is trying to do there. If he was just trying to break up the scene, or if he's trying to teach us something in that. Like, look, Anakin's learning some reckless stuff too, or Anakin's enjoying this lady more and more, because I don't know. I'm just wondering, like, what the purpose of that is, or just, yeah. Do you know anything, or has he said anything?
He's talked about that. Yeah, Anakin doesn't really have much to do in the beginning of this third act, and so he's kind of just there just to tag along and it's kind of funny when you see the Jedi, run into battle and there's this little 9-year-old kid following them. It's like, why is Anakin not in the swamp, protected away from every battle ever? Like, why is he even along for the ride? But I guess Qui-Gon has to keep track of him. He's the guard. He has got to stay with him. And he's like, I'm not supposed to train you, but I want you to watch me. So he's got to be there with him. So, but it's just, yeah. So I don't think he's talked too much. I haven't heard him say anything specifically about what Anakin's reaction to what's happening around him is exactly, but he keeps him around until he becomes useful again. Just like Jar Jar and Anakin, really after we leave Tatooine, are really kind of, they each have different moments to shine later on. But Jar Jar kind of has more to do in Coruscant in the beginning here, where he's he takes the Naboo to the Gungans, the Naboo to Boss Nass and does all that. But during Coruscant and throughout the battle, they both don't have a ton to do. They're kind of just on the sidelines. But then Anakin, he ends up blowing up the ship, and Jar Jar ends up, taking out a bunch of battle droids. And so, it's interesting because Obi-Wan in A New Hope was originally going to be in a very similar position to Anakin, where he was kind of just hanging around doing nothing in the final battle, because Obi-Wan wasn't going to die in an original version of A New Hope. He was going to be Yoda in Empire Strikes Back. Basically, he was going to keep training Luke. But then Lucas realized, like, I got nothing for him to do in the final act, and I need some kind of, ending point for the second. I need some kind of big moment for the second act and beginning of the third act. And so he talked to Al Guinness. He's like, I don't think I'm going to kill you off if that's okay. And Al Guinness was like, okay, I thought I was going to survive the movie, but all right. But it's interesting just to think that, that's kind of the position Anakin is in, where he's just, he does give Anakin something to do, because takes the Luke role, right? Luke blows up the Death Star, Anakin blows up the droid control ship. And so it's the same role, but Obi-Wan just didn't have anything to do. But for a while, Anakin is kind of that character where he's like, I'm just kind of tagging along. I'm kind of just a problem. I'm just just waiting to get hit with a blaster bolt right in the face. But he makes it out. And so I don't really know of anything specifically George has said, but other than just, he's just kind of tagging along for the ride for now. Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that before we get back to the Sith here?
No, we can move on. Like I said, these scenes are going to start moving quick here, because there's not as much. I don't know. Well, there's a million things we could talk about, but in terms of story, we'll keep moving.
Not a lot of setup necessarily, huh?
Yeah.
Kind of time to get into it.
Yeah. The action's happening now. But yeah, like you said, Sidious says, she is more foolish than I thought. This is interesting. So there's been some lines cut from this scene as well, which I think are interesting. So I want to read the script here a bit. So Darth Sidious says, she is more foolish than I thought. And Newt Gunray says, we are sending all available troops to meet this army of hers assembling near the swamp. It appears to be made up of primitives. We do not expect much resistance. And also a battle droid who's along for the ride, I guess, in this scene, in this version. He says, I am increasing security at all Naboo detention camps. And then Darth Maul speaks up and he says, I feel there is more to this, my master. The two Jedi may be using the Queen for their own purposes. And then Darth Sidious says, the Jedi cannot become involved. They can only protect the Queen. Even Qui-Gon Jinn will not break that covenant. This will work to that's where it cuts to his line. This will work to our advantage. And then Newt says, I have your approval to proceed then, my lord. He says, yep, wipe them out, all of them. So there's that little piece in the middle, which I think is kind of cool. Which is, it's interesting. It's like, I feel like what Darth Maul says there is interesting to me. I'm curious on your thoughts on that. He says the two Jedi may be using the Queen for their own purposes. Because I have my own thoughts of what I think that might mean, but what was your reaction hearing that?
Wow. I mean, that's all really cool. I think that it really foreshadows what Sidious is going to do in the Clone Wars, right? He's going to trap them with their ideals, where he's going to use their ideals against them. Wow. I don't know. Wow. I've never heard that before. That's pretty cool. I'm really curious to know what that would, like what Maul would be thinking there. If he's thinking, boy, I don't know. I'm going to have to process that one. But you're going to have to tell me, because I'm not going to come up with it before.
Well, I mean, I don't know for sure. I have my thoughts on it, but yeah, like just to touch on what you were saying. Yeah. The fact that he says, that's a good point, that Sidious, he knows how the Jedi operate. He knows that's his problem. That's why he's a problem for everyone. He knows so much. He knows how everyone works. He knows the procedures of the Senate. He knows how to navigate that, or how to keep it in gridlock, and he knows how the Jedi work, and he uses that against them. So here, and I like that he just calls Qui-Gon Jinn out by name, which is kind of fun. Is even Qui-Gon Jinn will not break that covenant, so he knows that the Jedi can't be warriors. He know, and I think that's one of the reasons why this might have been cut, just because it's kind of redundant. Where it's like we've established like in 3 scenes at this point that the Jedi are not gonna get involved in the war other than just to protect the Queen. But yeah, with Darth Maul's suspicion, where he's like, the two Jedi may be using the Queen for their own purpose. Like, what does their own purpose mean? Like, are they trying to? I'm assuming he means like they're going to use the Queen as a tool for their end. Like the Jedi have an agenda. They don't want this war to happen. They want to take down the Trade Federation. So it's the Jedi are going to be giving orders to the Queen and using her as a pawn, as opposed to the other way around, where what's actually happening is the Queen is telling them what to do, or she's not actually giving them orders, but she's in charge, and they're just going to protect her. So I'm assuming he just thinks that the Jedi are going to use, like Qui-Gon said, we can't use our powers to help her or to manipulate things. I think Darth Maul just suspects that they are going to do that. They're going to pull some. They got some trick up their sleeves that then they're going to use the Queen and use their influence or their powers over her to kind of take them out, or take out the Trade Federation. But I don't know. I'm this is kind of new to me. I'm just still kind of thinking about it, so I'm not sure. And I'm not sure if this is something that carries over into the final film. If this is something George changed his mind on before filming, or during editing, or if this is still true and he just cut it out again for time, or just didn't feel it was necessary. So it's one of those things. Like, yeah, I wouldn't let this color my view of the rest of the movie, but it's just an interesting little detail that it's just an extra thing where you go, oh, I wonder if that's anything. I just thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, because I mean, if nothing else, I mean, I feel like the script at least gives us a little bit more insight into what he had in mind. Even if he did backtrack on it, it gives us some insight into his original thought. But yeah, I was gonna bring up that name drop too. I just love that. That's really cool, because then it just shows, yeah, Palpatine knows these guys. He knows his enemy really well. Not only does he know them by name, but he knows what they'll do. And he knows, like, I can get Qui-Gon into a corner. Like, I know that. I just think that's really neat. That just shows his knowledge, and kind of what we were talking about, how earlier he's just the master chess player. Like, he knows his opponent really, really well. He's not just a guy in the shadow. Like, he's very knowledgeable. A very good student of what's going on. I'm just wondering, like, the first thought with the whole Queen thing, I'm wondering if Darth Maul is thinking particularly of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and just particularly Qui-Gon, how he'll use the Queen to maybe get his war, because Qui-Gon, I'm assuming, like Palpatine has said there, like, Qui-Gon knows his hands are bound, but he knows the Queen's aren't. So I wonder if that's what he's thinking. If Darth Maul kind of thinks like, okay, I know this Qui-Gon guy. He's going to use this situation to get what he wants. He knows his hands are tied, but he's going to manipulate this somehow to get what he wants. He's going to get his war. I don't know. That's my hunch, is that, just knowing who Qui-Gon is, that, yeah, okay, he can't fight the battle, but she can, and he's going to use her to do that. I don't know. That is a good question. I've never heard that before.
It's interesting. It's interesting thinking like it's a kind of almost an insight into like how do the Sith think the Jedi work? What do the Sith think the Jedi are thinking? Because like you can make that mistake of thinking that your enemy is, instead of thinking like your enemy, you think your enemy thinks like you, and so you misunderstand them or you make the wrong move. And so I'm wondering here, like, yeah, is he reading Qui-Gon wrong? Is he reading Qui-Gon right? Yeah, it's just vague enough there. I'm like, oh, that line of dialogue is interesting. I wonder what's going on there. But I like that. That's a good idea, though. That's an interesting way to read that. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I'll have to let that. No, clear, I guess, answers or clear ideas from either of us. I guess we're both just kind of thinking about it. But it's fun to think about. Maybe one of us will stumble upon it. Maybe our head will pop off the pillow at 3:00 in the morning and go, "Oh, I figured it out." But for now, it's just a fun little mystery. But I just thought it was cool. I just wanted to bring that up because I caught that. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I also, last thing I'll say is I think it's interesting that hearing Sidious say Qui-Gon Jinn, it's like, oh wait, because they haven't interacted directly. They don't see him ever. Now Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan interact with Palpatine, but again, at this point, we don't know they're the same person, and so the audience wouldn't know that. ideally. And so it's interesting that he knows Qui-Gon Jinn's like, whoa, so he knows exactly which Jedi it is. Like, how does he, like, it's kind of, again, like, oh, he knows everything, like you said. I just like it's just, or like, wait, does he, yeah, I was just thinking, like, what would that effect would that have on an audience? Like, wait, does he knows specifically which Jedi it is? Did Darth Maul find out? Like, how do they know his name? Is he a famous Jedi? It just, there's a lot of implications there. They're just kind of fun. Anyway, that was just the last thought I had on that. But for some reason, it's just fun. I want to hear Sidious say the words Qui-Gon Jinn because I don't think he ever does.
Yeah, I think that too because I'm not like, man, it just makes him so much more eerie, you know? Like, here's this guy, he knows the not so popular Jedi, you know, like he's just so well equipped. It just makes it really eerie. Yeah. Like he's not just thinking of like, oh yeah, I know of the Jedi in general, I know the council. It's like, no, I know these guys. I know what they're doing. I know who they are and what their tendencies are. And it's just so interesting to flip that because the Jedi, they don't really know anything about the Sith. You know, they're complete darkness. Like, I don't know anything about them. We know there's a Sith Lord somewhere. We don't know who died. We don't know the Master Apprentice. And they don't even really know anything about Sidious until Revenge of the Sith, you know? So it's just interesting to see this. It's just a what do you want to say? The threat of this enemy. To me, it just makes it so eerie and just so like, woo, this guy knows his stuff. He's a real threat. I think that's super cool. Yeah. Yeah. Huh. What was the other thing I was going to mention? Oh, shoot. I don't remember. I will point out that maybe we talked about this. I read in the archive book that George wanted to show that little walking hologram projector thing in this scene, just to kind of show why it's moving. But I just thought it was kind of a creepy detail, you know, just a spider leg hologram carrying Sidious.
Yeah, he does that reveal. He talked about that in the commentary too, where he says that there's this. At first, you're like, "Why? How is this hologram moving?" And then you cut to a Y, and you realize, oh, it's this creepy little leg machine, you know, walking around. Which is just a fun way because a lot of times he starts with a wide shot of a scene. Many times, almost every time, he starts with a wide and gets closer as the scene goes on. But there, he wanted to do that little reveal of the little mechanical, creepy hologram projector thing. So he started a little closer and then got wide later so that you saw it. So it was a reveal. But yeah, it's fun. Those little, yeah, just a fun idea. Like, oh, we need this. We want. They've been sitting around a lot. It's always better to have action in the scene, characters moving. So let's have them walking. Well, how we do that with the hologram? They could hold the hologram, or let's have the hologram walk with them. I'll give it, just you can kind of think about how they came to this conclusion along the way. It's like, let's have a walking hologram projector. And that's kind of creepy, right?
Yeah, it is creepy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I remember what I was gonna say. The other part is I appreciate that line from the dialogue or the script because I've always wondered what did Palpatine have in mind when he said we can use this to our advantage. Like, what was he thinking? But that sheds some light on it. At least, again, I don't know if George ended up with that, but at least originally that sheds some light on what his original thought was. Like, oh, I'm going to use the Jedi. I'm going to use their dogma to our advantage. But because that doesn't come across here in just the film. So I don't know. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, it's true because I think it does make a little that line. That line never really stood out to me as being like super mysterious. Like I didn't quite get it. It just felt it felt a little bit vague. But here it definitely seems to be more clearly. It's like, oh, he's saying that the Jedi can't they can't get directly involved in the war, so that will work to our advantage because we can, but we don't have any morals, so we can do. We're not trying to stay out of the. We're not trying to uphold the Jedi code and keep the Senate intact. No, we're gonna do what we can. But it makes me think, because the way it plays in the movie is Gunray says, we're sending all our troops to meet this army of hers assembling near the swamp. It appears to be made of primitives. We do not expect much. Does he? I can't remember if he says that last part. We do not expect much resistance. That's what's in the script right in front of me. And then Sidious, I don't remember him saying that, but yeah, Sidious says this will work to our advantage. And so it just makes me think like, oh yeah, I always, again, I forget because I've seen this a million times that as far as they're concerned, there is only the battle with the Gungans and the battle droids on the grasslands. Like that's all that's happening. And so they don't know about the Padme, about blue group and red group, Padme Panaka invading the city. They don't know about the attack on the droid control ship. And so like when he's talking about all this will work to our advantage, it's like, oh, they're just working with they're using the Gungans. Maybe things like, oh, those guys are bad. Like we'll be able to conquer them. Like we finally drawn them out from hiding, and so this will work to our advantage. We can get rid of them quickly since we were worried about we were trying to get rid of them anyway. And well, yeah, we can dispose of them easily. They're primitive, and yeah, that'll work to our advantage in taking over the planet and dealing with the queen later. We'll get rid of her army. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's just the idea that it's something about the way the movie plays out now is that he's talking about the Gungans, and that works to their advantage, that they're dealing with these primitives. Like, oh, well, that'll be easy. We got this. I'm thinking because he doesn't know. Yeah, and and I just wanted to point out that I'm dumb and I forget that all they know is that battle on the plains. They don't know about the space battle or the infiltration of the palace. That's a surprise.
Yeah, no, I forgot that too. So totally get it, man.
It's hard because it's hard to go back and like and trying to like, okay, what do I not know? Like I know too many things because I'm a Star Wars nerd. I know everything. I know every beat. So how do I put myself in the right frame of mind? Like what is Star Wars at this point? Star Wars, there's no Luke, there's no Leia, there's no Death Star, there's none of that stuff. There is no space battle at this point. There's no infiltration of the palace at this point. All we know is that this Gungan battle. Well, we know that they're planning to do those things, but all the bad guys know is that we've seen Gungans getting ready to attack. So it's just, yeah, it's fun because that's one of those ways where we kind of becomes new for us, right? Where it's actually removing information from your brain, like and looking at it with less information actually makes it seem more exciting than actually the trick, oddly enough, is not accumulating more information sometimes and like reading more and more and reading all the comic books and playing all the games. It's actually sometimes you have to remove knowledge and go, actually, from this perspective, it works a lot better. It makes a lot more sense.
Unlearn what you have learned.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. And then, boy, the line there, you get the full gambit of who Sidious is, right? Wipe them out. All of them. It's great. Yep. Yeah. Just pure evil, man. I don't care about a single one of these lives. What a contrast to Qui-Gon, right? And the Jedi. And Qui-Gon's been learning to appreciate every life. And now Sidious is like, nope, I don't care. Get rid of them. Every last one of them. I'm assuming that means the Queen, the Jedi, everybody, right? I don't think he's just thinking primitives.
Yeah, because again, they think everyone's going to be at that battle, so they don't know about the space. So it's like, yeah, just kill every last person.
What a contrast. Yeah,
and that's all, actually that just reminds me of Anakin's dialogue in Episode 2, where it's like that's how a Sith talks, right? Kill every single one of them. He's like that's why I talked about the Tusken Raiders, right? He's like, I killed every single one of them. It's just like, oh yeah, a Sith doesn't show mercy. A Sith doesn't differentiate between women and children. He's just like, nope, every single one. It's like, and now I'm not saying there's a connection there. I'm just saying that just reminds me of it, and it just seems that's that tone, that idea, that character of a Sith that seems to be consistent with how Anakin talks in that scene, and I guess that first dip into the dark side that we get from him, right?
Wow, yeah, that's powerful because this shows up in all three movies, right? Wipe them all out. Wow, that's crazy. Well, and then in Empire Strikes Back, all of it. That's the goal. We're going to wipe out the enemy completely, right?
Yeah, Sith don't take prisoners, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, this is so interesting to see Anakin's progression. Even seeing how here he's trying to save all life, and then Episode 2 he kind of dabbles into it. And Episode 3 he's fine, just wiping them all out. Like wow, wow. There you go. See all that in just one little line. That's so cool. Yeah, Sith are evil, man. Yeah, and you see that.
So it's the Gungans coming out of the fog, right?
Yes. Oh, which is so cool. Yeah. These, man. I know I'm just a big George fan, but this is so cool. This is why Star Wars is a movie and not a book, right? It's just it. I don't know if you've ever read some of the books, but it's so difficult for me, at least, to read some of the Star Wars books because it's so tedious to try and write a space battle, for example. And to follow it mentally, I mean, it's not like it's bad, but it's just Star Wars is as best on the made big screen, I love it. It's so great. I love these scenes, the fog, the sound. Oh man. I mean, like you said, there's very little dialogue, but you still need it. It's so good. Yeah. I'm trying to think on, yeah, because they come right out of the fog. And then that big pan into the fields that looks like Wyoming, which was where I'm from, or where
Yeah,
I'm living
it
right now,
does look like that. Yeah.
which is great. So anyway, I'm excited, man. Take us away.
All right. Well, that first shot, I love that you mentioned just the visual storytelling. The fact that this is a movie, not a book. It's not a video game. It's not a radio drama. It's not an audiobook. It's a movie because these upcoming scenes are heavily inspired by other movies that George has grew up watching and studied. And so that first shot of the Gungans coming out of the fog, that is inspired by a Kurosawa film, a guy we've talked about before, called The Throne of Blood. So it's a samurai movie, and so in that movie, the samurai like ride their horses through the fog, and they have these huge feathers these huge flags on the back of their horses, like that's kind of like bolted to the saddle, and so that's what the feathers on the back of the caduceus in this shot are kind of reminiscent of. And so it's very reminiscent of that sort of a tribal thing, the colors of the tribe of a flag or a feather, or a gigantic feather in this case. I want to see the birds that these feathers are from because they're huge. I don't think we ever see those, but
On that, he was supposed to have sort of a bird in this, right? I think like that was part of the concept art that he saved. They ended up being the water creatures from episode 2 on Camino, right? Wasn't that supposed to be here?
Oh, wow, you're right. I wonder if that's where the feather came from. That's totally true. Yeah, the whale thing. I think that was an idea back from Empire Strikes Back that they just kept trying to reuse in every movie, and they couldn't really get it in there until Attack of the Clones. I think it goes back further than Phantom Menace, if I remember right. But yeah, you're totally right. I forgot about that because there is art of that. You're on point there. Yeah.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, if you look them up, they're at least in the concept art they have in the archive book, it's the exact creatures that show up in the water in Camino from episode 2, but no birds or no feathers. Sorry, but there are the flying things. Huh.
Yeah, I think they were supposed to show up in Bespin, if I remember right. They're supposed to be kind of like these whales that kind of fly through the gas, like they breathe the gas or they feed on it or something like that, or that's how they stay afloat. I can't remember, but that design didn't really change much. Like you said, if you look at them, it looks exactly like they do in Camino.
That's right. It was a space whale thing because that's where Dave Filoni got it for Rebels and Ahsoka, right? And Mando.
Oh yeah,
things like that right now.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I think the Rebels. I can't. Oh, the hyperspace whales. What are they called?
Yeah, I think they literally call them space whales, but there's another name for them too. The Purgle. Yeah,
the Purgle. Mm-hmm. Yes. Wow, I can't believe I forgot that. But yeah, so I was all excited, like, is there feathers on that thing? But maybe not. Maybe there originally was going to be, and they changed the design, and then they dropped the creature altogether. But anyway. Yeah. But anyway, that's what. Anyway, so no, you're good. That was cool because I totally forgot about that. But yeah, so the feathers on the back of their saddles are kind of reminiscent of the samurai flags from that movie. And then this next shot, like you said, that panning shot of the Gungan blowing his horn and seeing the whole army. That kind of shot is straight out of a David Lean movie, the guy who directed Lawrence of Arabia and Bridge over River Kwai. He's one of Lucas's inspirations. I don't know if you've seen any of his movies, but they're really great. He's one of the greatest filmmakers ever. He's so good. And he's that kind of epic shot of a huge landscape with armies and stuff. Like John Ford's known for that kind of thing, but specifically with in the context of an army with a bunch of people populating that whole area. David Lean shot these huge movies with this huge scale like that. Back before CGI, it's amazing how much coordination, like how much they had to do to get, like they actually had thousands of extras out there in the desert filming Lawrence of Arabia. I just saw the Dune movies, Dune Part 1 and Part 2, and they were filmed in the same location. In the original book, Dune was heavily inspired by Lawrence of Arabia. The plot is very similar, and also, of course, George Lucas was in turn inspired by the book Dune. So there's a lot of connections there. But yeah, it's so cool to see just a beautiful landscape. And I think they filmed it in Jordan, so it's a big desert with these cool rocky formations. And but anyway, there's a lot of shots that are very reminiscent of this one with the Gungan army in that movie. So I'm not just saying this isn't like a copy of a shot like that, where like the fog shot. That's what's almost like lifted directly from Throne of Blood, but it's very, very similar. That's definitely his kind of style. And you see that kind of thing. You see that in Lord of the Rings too, like when you in Two Towers, especially those kind of shots. Like that's something that back before we could show hundreds of thousands of characters, like in Lord of the Rings, or thousands of CGI characters and armies going at it. There are these directors in like the 50s and 60s and I think earlier that were able to do this with real people. So it's a cool homage to that. Again, throwback filmmaking of a time where you don't really see much of that anymore.
Yeah. I was gonna mention something about Dune, but I'll leave it. I don't remember what it was. Anyway, yeah, I love those shots. I love them. They're so great. I don't know what it is, but just that pulling back and seeing how massive the battle is, and just everybody's there, and it just makes it so epic.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned the landscape, how it looks kind of like Wyoming where you're from. I can't remember exactly what they took a lot of live like photos from a real location to kind of create this environment. I know a lot of people joked it looks like the Windows XP screensaver, or the background looks like they're fighting there. This broad daylight, green grassy hills, But one remarkable thing I wanted to point out about this is that a lot of movies that have CGI battles in them, like this, a lot of times they're in kind of bad weather, or they're at nighttime, or there's wind and rain. Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, I think of the Helm's Deep battle, like pouring rain, darkness, it's in the middle of the night. But Lucas chooses to show it in broad daylight here, in like harsh sunlight in the middle of the day. There's not a lot of atmosphere. There's not a lot of cinematic trickery, or trying to, it's not shot at magic hour with a golden sunlight. It's just very, very plain and just basic. Just presenting it as it is, as if it would be, and so it's very stark in that way. And so in a lot of old films that I've been kind of referencing, these big battle scenes almost always took place in broad daylight, because it was be so much easier to film. And in fact, there's a war movie that I'm going to forget the name of, but it was depicting as a historical battle that actually happened in World War II. But the battle in real life happened in, I think it was at night, or in during rain or some really bad weather. And of course, you can't control the weather back then when you're filming everything practically in real life and live action. So they just had to film it in broad daylight, because they had no other choice, really. So again, that's sort of a harkening back to older filmmaking styles, to have like a big battle scene in broad daylight. You can think Braveheart, or Lawrence of Arabia. There's plenty of scenes in that. There's a huge invasion of a city in broad daylight, just because you have to film a scene like that in daytime. It's just logistically. So it's harkening back to that kind of older style filmmaking, but also it's remarkable because that makes it really difficult on the VFX team, especially in 1999. Because think of Jurassic Park, the dinosaurs, the T-Rex, big reveal of the T-Rex in that movie is in the middle of the night in the pouring rain, and it's dark, and so you can kind of hide the CG. Like, CG was good back then, as best as they could do, but the scenes where the dinosaurs are in broad daylight don't look quite as good. They look a little more rubbery, a little more CGI. And so the fact that he told him to do this entire army, both armies are CGI, both armies are digital, in the most like midday sun, like there's no any kind of trickery, no weather, nothing they can really hide in. That's a huge task for the CGI team, even today, but definitely in 1999 for a VFX crew to handle that. So that's just remarkable that it looks good at all. Is amazing to me that this, and this many years later, 25 years later.
Yeah, it still holds up. I mean, just watching it now, it's like, wow. Yeah, they did a fantastic job. I mean, the droids, like, I don't look, every once in a while, if you look at the Gungans, you're like, okay, I can see a little bit of CGI there, but like just watching the battle droids, the tanks, it's like, man, look like droids in the sun, It's pretty amazing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the scene when the droids, activate, when they get that they're dispensed from the ship and they pop up. Like, those shots look so good to me. Like, there's nothing wrong with them. And that's just the nature of CG as well. The hard surface, inanimate objects are much easier to render, make look more realistic than organic things with skin and texture and hair and all that stuff. So yeah, I agree. As the droids in particular always look really good in this sequence.
Really great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even in Naboo, same thing. I was just like, wow, they look like they're sitting right there in the plaza. You don't look at it and go, oh, that's pretty bad CGI. Like, that doesn't really come into mind. Yeah. That's cool.
And the last thing I'll say about the battle of like just the nature of the two armies is that this is like our first time in film history seeing two, non excuse me, non-human forces fight. Like that, you can't accomplish either of these armies in live action. It just would be impossible to do. So before this movie, a battle scene like this would just be impossible to do, to get this level of performance and character out of both armies that you needed. And so this is, our first taste of that. And of course, it would eventually lead to Lord of the Rings, which I think holds the record for the most soldiers, and about like hundreds of thousands of soldiers fighting in those battle scenes, all told, in all three of those movies. So that was, shortly after this movie, but this movie was kind of our first taste of two CG armies going at it and fighting each other, and seeing them fight, and seeing characters fight and weapons fight and vehicles fight in a way that we never would have seen before this. So it's actually a huge, I grew up with it, I'm used to it, but having to remind myself this was a big deal for audiences to see this for the first time. Like, this was very different from anything they'd seen at this point.
Yeah, good point. This is very familiar to me, so I wouldn't have thought about that. I'm not the biggest movie buff either, so it's good to hear like what other movies are doing, what this is inspired by, what it has inspired. It's kind of neat. Yeah. Boy, and I just got a comment on the sound. The sound in these are just amazing. Did Ben Burtt do episode 1? Do you know?
Yep.
He did
all George's Star Wars films.
He did all of them. Okay. Gotcha. I couldn't remember if he stopped, at the end of the prequels or not, but okay.
Matt Wood was on board at this point. Matthew Wood was part of the team at this point. But he took over. I think Ben Burtt retired at some point. I think he went on to do things past Star Wars, obviously, but he retired as a sound engineer or sound designer, I think in the 2010s, somewhere around there. But before Force Awakens came out, because that's when Matthew Wood kind of took over.
But Ben Burtt, man, guy blows me away. I mean, it's just amazing. I love the sound effects here. I mean, just the cannon shots, but also the shield in particular, how it hits the shield. Just what a great noise. And I love seeing that aesthetic, it's just such a good aesthetic for the Gungans. I mean, it's a bubble, basically, and they live in bubbles. They're underwater creatures. So cool.
I'm an idiot. I never thought about the bubble shield being like reminiscent of the bubbles that they live in. You're a genius. Wow, I'm an idiot. How come I never thought of that? Wow.
No worries.
Okay.
It makes you feel better. I'm just now realizing that. So, so don't feel too bad. Yeah, but it's really cool. And I like if you'd have sat me down and said, "Hey, can you come up with a sound of a laser bolt hitting a bubble shield?" I mean, I just don't even know what on earth would you do? But Ben Burtt does it. And it's just perfect. I love it. So it's just so great. And I think too, remind me if I'm wrong, but this is the first Star Wars movie we see a visible shield, right? As we didn't have any visible shields, like something you could actually see. We talked about it, like Empire, Empire, and then Return of the Jedi, right?
That's
but
a
we
good
don't
point.
see the shield; we just hear about it. But in here we see it both here with the Gungans, and then on Anakin's Naboo fighter later.
I was just thinking about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Right? I mean, I could be wrong.
I think you're right. The only thing I can sort of think of is the Death Star reactor in Return of the Jedi. When they're flying in, you can kind of see some kind of energy distortion around the reactor when they fire at it, like as if the shield's kind of like failing or something. But that might not be a shield. It might just be just energy crackling around it. But I think you're right. Like outside of that kind of holographic projection at the Rebel, meeting where they're trying to figure out how to take down the second Death Star, the shield coming from Endor. Except for that representation, which is not an actual shield. Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think we ever see a physical shield, which is a good point, because that would have been very hard to realize back then without the digital technology they had for this film.
Right.
That's a good point.
This is pretty cool to see. I mean, here's our first glimpse at a shield in Star Wars. It's kind of neat. So then we get it all over the place. The Gungans' actual physical shields, but then the big bubble shield, and then Anakin's shield. That's just pretty cool. Kind of cool to see.
Yeah, I loved those kind of three little tendrils of that kind of like turn into like the canopy, the umbrella of the bubble. I love the way that looked as a kid. And the sound, right? It was so cool.
It was cool too. And I didn't get to research this. I don't know if George just liked it or he had some thought behind it, but those big giant ones that bear the shield generators, the big giant like dinosaur creatures. I don't remember what they're called, but I just think they're really cool looking.
Yeah, the Fambas.
Yeah, they're called Fambas. Is that what
Faamba, I think.
Gotcha. I just love the way George does this because it's like, here's this big, giant, menacing dinosaur, but you don't, at least I guess this is just my perspective. I never looked at them and felt scared. You know what I mean? Like they're not scary. And I just think like he does such a good job at mastering that. Like again, just what we've been talking about, the context here is to kids. And I just feel like he does such a great job at making this movie for kids. So, with a big, giant, menacing dinosaur.
Huh.
So,
Excellent point. Yeah, because like it's interesting. Yeah, it's a good point because they're if you saw it in real life, you would be terrified of it. But because they're with the Gungans, we like the Gungans. They're the good guys, and we're not. They don't make super terrifying noises. You know, they're not portrayed like the sea monsters, and they're not. But contrast that with the next big creature, quote unquote creature we see, is the tanks cresting the hill of the Trade Federation army. Like those are intimidating looking. Those do kind of freak you out a little bit. I could tell there was a kind of a sense of dread as a kid watching that. And also that shot of them cresting the hill, that's another reference to a Kurosawa film, where Seven Samurai, where the kind of army just cresting over the hill. It's a very, very similar shot.
So cool. Yeah, that's a good point. It really does. You really do feel the eeriness of the tanks coming over. And it's, man, I mean, just a brilliant move to not have music. And there's no music happening. And you're just letting the sound carry all that. And just the big, deep rumblings and the animals scurrying away. And yeah, I just watched this again now that we've talked about it. It's cool to see, like, here comes the bugs, that have infested the planet. And they're trying to make a stand, but this massive bug army is coming. It's like, ooh, he kind of sends that little chill up your spine. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, one quick thing. Those animals, I was just, for some reason in my head, those animals that run away, for some reason in my head, I guess, well, I'll just say it just for reference, to give you a sense of scale. Those animals are the same animals that Anakin like was riding and falls off of in episode 2.
Really?
The big, like huge
Whoa.
tick looking things. Yeah. What are they called?
Oh,
like Nunas? No, that's something else. Anyway, but because in this shot, they look very, very small, but like those are actually very, very large animals. That shows you how big the troop transports are.
Wow. Yeah. No, I never knew that. Wow. Yeah, they're massive. I thought they were like little rat things.
I know. Well, what tipped me off is when you said scurry. I was like, oh yeah, he thinks they're small like I did. And I realized, oh wait a second, I think it was Rob Coleman, the animation director on the prequels. He mentioned that I think in episode 2 commentary, he talks about this is Anakin's riding the same character we saw at the Battle of Naboo. I'm like, wait a second, I thought they were tiny. Yeah, they're huge.
Wow.
They're the size of a big truck or something.
That's cool. Yep. I didn't know that. Huh. Still pretty neat they even put that in there, just for the purpose of scale, but also just to show kind of the menacing and there's life here. And yeah. Great. Well, should we move on? Next scene?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, last thing I'll say is that there was another Gungan character in the original script. There was another Gungan character introduced called General Seal, Ceel. And he was the commander of the army, but his character was just folded into Captain Tarpals. So I think my guess is just that ILM just couldn't handle another digital character. Like if you look at the Gungans in the swamp, there's a shot of Gungans kind of just watching what's happening, and they all just look like Jar Jar Binks with like slightly taller, slightly shorter. They just all kind of look the same. You can tell they were kind of stretching the budget with the digital characters, so they probably just couldn't handle another one. So they just made Captain Tarpals. That's my guess as to why. But it's interesting just seeing, there's another Gungan character that would have been there that we didn't hear about. And one last, sorry.
Oh, that's cool.
I lied. This is the last thing I'll say. I didn't notice this till very recently, but in the movies, in the prequels, I think this is still true in Revenge of the Sith, but they all have each droid has a different voice or a slightly different, it might be the same actor doing the voice, but it's slightly different, like different tone or different accent or however you want to say it. And for some reason, I think it's because I played so many Star Wars video games where the droids did have the same voice as a kid. In my head, I thought they all had the same voice. But then I realized, in Clone Wars, all the droids have the same voice. That was a new thing for at least Star Wars on screen. Because even though Matthew Wood, he does do the droid voices in Revenge of the Sith, there is a lot more variation to them. Each droid has a different attitude, different pitch kind of thing, where it's very constant. There's some variation in Clone Wars, to be sure. There's a couple droids that sound different. But for the most part, they have that droid voice that we kind of all associate with Matthew Wood's performance now. But anyway, I just noticed that recently. I'm like, oh yeah, all these droids have different voices, especially in this movie. Because we don't really hear droid. I think we only hear like one battle droid voice in episode 2. So they don't really show up much in that one.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought about that. Do you know, I've noticed that. And do you know, was that just a thing that kind of morphed over time into like, let's just have one guy do the voice? Or is it intentional? Because I always kind of thought there was an intentionality behind that, where the droids episode 1, they're all kind of tied to that central computer, sort of independent-ish, but like when you get to episode 3, it's like, well, these are just spit out quick, factory produced. We're not going to worry about different vocals. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I was always wondering if there was an intentionality behind that
I always
to
thought it
show
was
the
interesting
progression.
because there's a moment in Clone Wars where the bow droids are talking about one of their fallen droids. And they say, "Oh, he was one of those like droid control droids, and we're independent thinkers." So the droids
Roger,
became
roger.
yeah, exactly. They became more independent. The droids became more independent. They realized it was a bad idea to after as we'll see. There's a bad idea to have one central control ship that controls all the droids. So the droids were run independently. So I thought it was odd, and that they all started to sound the same. Even when when it seems like when they're all controlled by one source, they should sound the same. And as they become independent, then they should start having different voices. That's just the logic that makes sense to me. I think my guess is I think for the movies they kind of still they keep the different voices for the droids. My guess is since the consistency happened in Clone Wars is just for the sake of television, for the sake of budget and time, it's too hard to with as many scenes that they had with droids as often as the droids were going to be featured. It would have been impractical just to have a different voice for every single one of them. Of course, I say that, and then they have D. Bradley Baker doing a different voice for every single clone, but he still does kind of have his standard clone voice. Um, and it might just be, it makes more sense to do it for droids since they're robots and they're kind of, mass produced anyway. So I'm not sure if there's a specific logic to it. Um, I haven't heard of anything coming from George or Ben Birch because I know he did voices for some of the droids and some of the creatures and stuff. So a lot of times he had a lot of input on creating the voices for those things. So I haven't heard anything, any specific line of logic running through why their voices change or don't. It's just something I just noticed. Sorry, I kind of took us through a little cul-de-sac that was unproductive, but
No, that's okay. Well, I was curious. I've always been curious because I thought that was intentional. Just because it seems like here Palpatine seems to be kind of experimenting with armies, which one's going to be his primary army, droids. And I've always kind of assumed, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I always kind of assumed that he started like, hey, let's do droids. They're total obedient. We can do that. They're all tied to a central computer, which he learns doesn't work at the end of this movie. But once he sees like, oh, this isn't the greatest, and then I don't know when he got the clone idea, but I've always kind of interpreted it as he got the clone idea after this failed. I was like, well, that could be way better. And then just kind of gave up on the droids in a sense, where it's like, okay, let's just mass produce them, make them cheap, because we see them get dimmer and dimmer as we progress to episode 3, like they're episode 2, they're kind of just neutral, but by the time we see them in episode 3, they're goofy. They're kind of, all the same voice, sort of mass produced. Whereas like here, it seems like they're all tied to a central computer for sure, but it's more like, there just needs to be more effort put into this droid army. You know what I mean?
gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I've always kind of interpreted that way and just seen like as he shifts from droids to clones, but I'm all speculation on that. I don't know if I have any proof as to this is what George had in mind, but that's just always the way I interpret it. Do you know what
That's
his thoughts were on it?
I don't think so. But one thing I just thought of, which you touched on, is kind of, I think you are saying this. I just want to elaborate on and kind of clarify.
Yeah.
I think this is what you're saying. That that these droids are run by the same computer, so they're not as individualistic. Like as you see in Revenge of the Sith, there's that droid that when he hands the lightsaber to Lucas, when he hands the lightsaber to Grievous, he goes, "You're welcome." The droids have more attitude, and we see that in Clone Wars a lot. And I thought, oh, okay, so they're independent thinkers now, so they're a little more autonomous. They have a little more, they can kind of have more personality now. So that logic kind of makes sense, which I never thought about. So that's a good call. Pick up on that. But yeah, in terms of the progression of the droid army to clones, it's tricky. Like when Sidious comes up with the idea for the clone army and sends Dooku off to go do that, and when does Dooku turn to Sidious? There's a trick. The timeline there has kind of always been kind of tricky. So we'll have to get into that once we get to episode 2 because I don't have any information on that right now. But that's an interesting question. I'm not exactly sure what the storyline is of the droids.
Yeah. No, I was curious, and I could be just totally reading into that, and George just thought it could have just been like, well, let's just use one voice for it. By the time we got to Revenge of the Sith, and that's all he ever thought about it. But I just always kind of assumed that's what happened. But I could totally see it just morphing, and George is like, hey, let's just make the droids goofy because this is a heavy movie, and there you go. I don't know. But that could be me. But that was my in head canon, is that Palpatine started just mass producing them. I don't care about them. They just need to serve their purpose, and we're done with them. And we just learned here at the end of this episode that, okay, we're not going to have them all tied to one computer, so one ship blows up and they all go down. I don't know, but yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. That was just, it does have to do with the story, but I'm just curious on if you knew anything. It is a little bit of a rabbit trail. Because they're just so militant here. They're so focused. They're so unified. And then by the time of the Revenge of the Sith, they're just all over the place and goofy. And yeah, it's just, there is a little arc there, but
yeah, they start out with a couple. There's like a few jokes they have. The Roger thing is a joke, like they say it twice, like funny. And then like the droid is like, wait, that doesn't compute. Oh wait, you're under arrest. Like there's little tiny little moments of humor there, but yeah, for the most part, they're much more just kind of like flat and not don't have any really personality. So yeah, it's interesting. That's a nice little rabbit trail to explore further someday. Sorry, I can't take us any further down, unfortunately, but that's interesting. I never really thought about that, so you got me thinking about it. Yeah, we'll have to look into that. But yeah, sorry, that was I started us on that bad rabbit trail by mentioning the different voices thing, because you're ready to move on to the next scene before, and I derailed us. So
that's okay. It's great. It's good stuff to talk about. So yeah.
All right, that's it for this episode. Join us in the next one as we continue our series on the Phantom Menace. As always, thanks for listening, and on to the next one.